Here we go.
Daniel,
Hello, Greg Coleson.
nice to meet you, brother.
All right, can you hear me now?
I can do.
All right,
Do you hear me?
yeah, audio is a little low. You're on Skype, right?
Yes, sir. I got a little. It's a microphone headset thing.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
I don't have. I don't know if I have a way to turn that up on my end or not. Let's
Well,
see.
I think we've got it. Jade, how's the sound out there? Give me a shout out here. I think you're all
Okay.
right. We'll see.
All right.
Okay, Magoob.
Uh,
All right, so they're saying audio's good. Well, Greg, welcome to the Edge Television broadcast. This is your first time. Where are you at? You out in the West?
yes, sir. I'm in northern New Mexico.
Oh boy,
Four Corners there.
what's the name of the city?
It's near Farmington, New Mexico. It's like Shiprock is like 30 minutes west of us.
Uh-huh. Well, let me ask you, man. Do you guys have any illegal immigrants running around down there? How's that going?
I'm pretty sure there's plenty, but most of them are further south, Santa Fe, Albuquerque, that kind of thing, big city stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure the ones that come out here, when the bounty hunters come up for some of them, they've even hunted for some guys that they had been searching for that came from Alaska. And they just kind of blend in here too, and it was just strange. We had some occurrences of that, so that was fun.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah. Hey man, you guys don't got no Bigfoots down there, do you?
What kind?
Bigfoot?
Yes, actually, this little Farmington newspaper, the Farmington Daily Times, did a report about 5 years ago, and the Native Americans and Navajos. There was a good article about that near Hogback, New Mexico, that they had reported some of those. Yes.
Wow. So do you plan on going on a hunt, Greg?
Not anytime soon. About the best I do is like a skunk hunt to get rid of some of those in the neighborhood, and that's about it.
Okay, now I know. So you're out west like that. So you got some chupacabras, right?
I have not heard of much of that, but the Santa Fe, like Linda Moulton Howell is in this part of the country, and she's reported on some of those things across the country, and I've seen some of the pictures. They're quite strange. The dog type, walk on two legs.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Dog type. Sounds like you're talking about Debbie Wasserman Schultz, man. Hey, well, I tell you, hey, I slid that one in, didn't I? Hey, also, we'll be talking about, and that's the way I do, Greg. I don't know if you ever watch the show, but you got to be ready for it, okay, brother?
Yes, sir. I'm already ready for everything, man.
Okay, well, all right, we're going to try to mess you up, so we'll see how you do. It's part of the show. But anyway, it's all good fun. But anyway, we're going to talk about some serious things here. We got you listed as a researcher and analyst on issues related to end times and doctrine and time shifts and gravity waves, all solar changes, all the things we love to talk about on this program every Saturday night. But let's get a little bit about who you are. You're coming on the show first time. How would you describe yourself? Give us a little of your history.
Well, I have a pretty strong scientific bent. I did a lot of research and analyst work. I used to work for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice doing security down there, and I'd work computer science stuff on the side, building computers to kind of keep your mind off of some of the stress of the work, and it was my hobby. And I did a lot of research and analyst work and research, and noticing, from back as a kid when we went to school, they told us that the sun was a yellow, steady state star. That's what we were told. That's what we understood. You get along in life about 20 years later, you start looking at the sky and you see the sun's looking brilliantly white, and it's just, and the kids in school, you look at their books and actually the textbooks, you see it, and they're talking about it being a white variable output star, and I'm thinking, what is why? How did this happen? I can see it myself. I can and ask the question, why is all these changes taking place? And when I'd left the job, moved back here home from Texas, come back to New Mexico, I did some audios with a guy by the name of Frank Whalen on Frankly Speaking radio out of Republic Broadcasting Network. I was one of the only guests he had that did 4-hour shows with him, and I did a lot of topics on most of the solar stuff and radiation things, and every single one of our archive shows we did was purged within the next couple of days. No other guest he had ever had that stuff happen to him. And after he finally folded it up and quit audio stuff and interview stuff after about 14 years, and we kind of mixed it up a bit and caused a little bit of trouble out there in the scientific community talking about this stuff because they don't want people to know about the South Atlantic anomaly. They don't want people to know about the fact there's holes in our atmosphere. There's holes in the Van Allen belt. And
Well,
it kind
hey,
of,
bingo. Hey, there's something I got to talk about right now. Did we go to the moon?
I don't see why not, but we didn't do that little tin can thing they talked about.
Hmm.
I know enough about the secret space program. My dad was in some high security places in the world, working as a heavy equipment operator, doing construction. It wasn't just water cooler talk of the stuff he discovered and found out about. We went there, we did that. There's been that's come behind the scenes of whistleblowers that admitted the fact that we have equipment that could go from here to Mars and back before lunch.
Mm.
As actual physical devices, yes.
Mhm. Well, the reason is because what happened there, you said holes in the Van Allen radiation belt. It seems to me the only way we could get up on there to the moon is if we can go through one of them holes, because what I understand is the Van Allen radiation belt is almost like a security blanket around the earth that you can't penetrate or going to fry you like a halal bacon.
Absolutely, absolutely. Even Mr. Van Allen himself admitted the fact when he'd done interviews back during the 50s and 60s that it would take a considerable amount of lead shielding to let an astronaut be able to escape our atmosphere. You get high altitude Air Force people that ever even discuss this stuff. You get high enough up there, like the X-15 and some of the stuff in SR-71, they even have to have a certain amount of shielding, because you get up higher than that, you start seeing spots. Because you get too much radiation, like being in a nuclear power plant that's fixing to melt down. That's the feeling, is you get spots before your eyes, and the stuff is strong enough to kill you. So how do they do it with this little tin can thing that they put on top of a big
Yeah, I've
cylinder
seen that.
box?
Yeah, that thing is sitting on the moon and is wrapped with aluminum foil. Wow, man, that's some heavy duty stuff right there. They didn't reverse engineer that from the aliens. Some aluminum foil. I mean. Jeez.
No.
You don't see the aliens flying around in an aluminum foil ship. Now, it has been said, Greg, that I've got aluminum foil underneath my hat so that the government can't penetrate with their thought rays.
Sure. Yeah, that's comical too. Yes, there is. But there's a lot of funny things on that. Thinking that aluminum foil on your head might actually be enough of an antenna to make it solar radiation stuff worse, and gamma rays and stuff.
Wait a minute. Did I step on your did I step on your stuff there, Greg? Do you have aluminum foil in your hat?
No.
Okay,
No.
just checking, man. All right, so hey, Dreamwalker out of the live chat says, can you say anything more about the hole in our atmospheres? And by the way, what about the ozone, man? Whatever happened to that fear mongering threat that we're all going to burn up because the ozone's gone? Is it there or is it not? Where the hell is it?
10 years ago, at least 10, maybe 15 back, you could find news articles that talked about the atmospheric conditions, where they did a study of examining how much the ionosphere was expanding during the sun side of the day. And they had some estimates. They had some small measurements of what they had estimated on physics, whiteboards and stuff, what they just sit there and look at. When they actually had instruments go up in the atmosphere, do satellite stuff, do more heavy instruments with the space station and stuff, they found out that the atmosphere during the day in the ionosphere was expanding far beyond what they had actually even it was at least 2 or 3 times more. I'd have to do some charts and show you some PowerPoint stuff sometime when we get to do an actual physical video. There's some pretty impressive things about what these guys discovered. And one of the major things in my quantum shift, there's this things out of Stanford University. They did this major article that's called The Strange Case of Solar Flares and Radioactive Elements. And these scientists made the discovery that there's mysterious emissions from the sun that's mutating matter. We're talking about hard science here. And these guys are asking the question, what is this that's causing some of our radioactive materials we're doing in studies that's mutating it and causing it to, the radioactive properties of it to accelerate? And they're actually emitting more radio, and it's breaking down quicker. And I can tell you this for a fact. This major research piece that was published back in August 23rd of 2010, this major piece was the very premise behind the movie 2012.
Wow.
Because if you ever saw the movie 2012, at the very beginning, they're in an underground facility deep, and they got neutrino test systems out there underneath the ground to try to see what's causing the Earth's core to heat up. And they were doing some studies on that. And in the movie, it was indicating that it was causing the entire core of the Earth to expand. And that other movie, too, called The Core, There's a whole lot of interrelated stuff that matches what physical evidence we already know to be a fact that scares the scientific world. And they're trying to explain it, and they're kind of, people that get excited about these stories, the barroom talk, back rooms and stuff, that they get together and they try to figure out what's going on, and they share stuff. They share stories. Even back in the Clinton era, we had all these stories about a lot of these major Hollywood people was so tightly connected with people in government on the Washington side, up the senators and levels. They get together and, do the fun thing where, oh, I got to visit this nice, big movie star and stuff, and we had good drinks and, got drunk together and, lots of alcohol, loose lips, sink ships. They told a lot of stories about some of the things they had witnessed and recognized and saw secret papers on and secret committee stuff and government. And the Hollywood people pick up on these things and they make stories out of it and tell stories about it. And that's where some of this Hollywood science fiction stuff comes from. It comes from real science in the background.
I was going to say, Greg, are they letting us know that that technology exists? Or
Absolutely.
are they just, okay. So,
yeah.
Let me ask you something about that. There have been those that have said that in order for the demonic side to operate in this planet, it has to request permission, or it has to allow the humans to know in some kind of spiritual law of some kind. And therefore, they say the outlet for that is some of these movies, basically saying, here's what's going to happen. And if you say, watch the movie, then you have been officially alerted. They fulfill some sort of celestial contract. Have you heard of that?
Yes, absolutely. And even on the Illuminati Freemason side, it's one of their tenets that they have to tell you what they're going to do to you before they do it. And in the same premise of, they prime the public with some of this stuff from, sci-fi stuff to let us know in advance. There's been quite a few things over the years, changes of the atmosphere, changes of the sun. The movie The Core was quite impressive with some of the technology that they revealed in that. Some of the stuff I got to witness, I had a good friend back in Texas that his father was in the heavy science. He was one of the real guys that you would meet in your life if you got to meet him that was working the secret science program side of it. You hear a lot of people talk about what they, how these people, how they themselves have been part of the secret space program. This man's father was a genuine article. He had 3 special security men. It's like either special forces types, secret service types, secret, space program type, security people that had been vetted in high security. This guy had 3 people that went with him everywhere he went. He'd be off doing his job, working for the government for 3 or 4 months out of the year. He'd get to come home for 2, maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks at best. And when he died of cancer, of course, being around some of the stuff. He had promised to his son that he was going to give him the information about some of the stuff he'd been working on. And he didn't have a chance. His son was 18 when he died, so he really didn't have a chance to give him too much. But he left some parts and pieces behind. And having enough scientific background, I saw some of the stuff, some of the bits and pieces of equipment that this guy worked on. And one of these unique pieces of device, the only way I could describe this, there is ancient Eastern text that talk about the Vimana and all these other, high technology stuff that they had thousands of years ago. One of the weird things, there was a little village in the middle of this valley that, from one of these texts, that gave this testimony of what they had seen, that this bolt of lightning coming off the top of one mountain struck a mountain across the valley, and the mountain disappeared. This kind of technology, this stuff exists. There's people that interviewed with Linda Moulton Howe about some of the technology we've been working with that has the capability to fire holes even through our planet and strike objects on the other side of it, completely through our Earth.
Wow.
And that's spooky stuff. You can go back to some of her archive interviews that she did on Coast to Coast, and she, you can find this stuff, Linda Moulton Howe stuff. And one of these devices that I did some research discovery, if you know what something called resonance. They did resonance is if you take an army, they already established this to be a scientific fact. If you take an army in lockstep walking or marching across the bridge, like a brick bridge, it'll create enough resonance within the bridge to actually destroy the bridge. So they can't march in lockstep across these old stone bridges and stuff, because it'll that resonant energy coming back and forth and echoing
Well,
inside
no,
this.
well, Greg, I saw there's a classic, I think it's like a 40s or 50s video of somebody using some sound machine on a bridge, and it starts to oscillate until it
Yeah.
finally just destroys. So, but that was 50, 60 years ago. So what would they have now to? Certainly, they've got better tech even than that.
Yes, something like the day the Earth stood still. They sold information about the technology. They showed it what it was like. There was a description of one of these devices I saw, and because of the light properties involved in this device, if you take the idea of a laser microphone, you know how a laser microphone works.
Yeah.
And so you shoot the laser microphone at an object like a window. That's why the
Right.
windows are all green in Bethesda, Maryland, and CIA
Right.
headquarters.
So bounce off.
There's
Right.
Yeah, so you can't penetrate that. But if you take this and turn it around the other way, this one device, and the best estimate I could give for a name, I would name it to understand what this was. It was a light harmonics generator. If you have a light beam that's capable of actually sending a sound through this, of a high intensity sound wave through this laser beam, if you jack up the signal strong enough and enough resonant frequency, you could cause a physical object to disintegrate and just molecularly disassemble itself and fall apart. There are tales that I've heard from background sources that if you jack this energy up far enough, you could cause a mini nuclear explosion within types of materials that you're shooting at. The laser beam actually does a ping on the object, determines what its physical material is, be metal, concrete, wood, and that ping gives them an idea of exactly what in high speed time frame that you can determine what this material needs as a resonant frequency of that material that was cause it to either set on fire or even melt down.
Well,
turn
Greg, what you're describing to me is something I've always wanted to know. When you get down to the molecular level, that to atoms, maybe even to the quark size particles, there's a space between those particles. It sounds to me like whatever physical law, or for that matter, spiritual law, that is holding matter together is undone or negated, and therefore they separate from their space where they're stationed. What is it that holds those particles in place?
That gets to the very heart of this quantum shift conundrum thing, the report I did. I think if the description was left on your website, if you remember to put that description to that archive page.
I did. It's in there.
So when they go to that page and they download the PDF and listen to the audio while they read the PDF, they'll learn something about technology that goes back to the time of Tesla. The sciences we're working on, this thing called ether. In our vernacular of our day, I call it switchcraft, the art of switching information and switching names for things and renaming stuff so it doesn't actually allude to its original source information. All this quantum stuff, all this talking about dark matter, dark energy, all of it is exactly the same thing. Tesla did major experiments. A more recent man of our modern time, Eric P. Dollard, you can look him up and find out information about him. He's a little bit, off, but yes, Tesla was a little bit off. Einstein was a little bit off. All these guys, it takes these people a little bit outside the box to make actual real discoveries and find things that actually, change our world.
On Tesla, was he born with some sort of superior intelligence, or did he find ancient writings to give him ideas on how to develop things? Where did he get his direction from, his research direction?
I often wonder that myself too, because if you look at the old stories about Edgar Cayce as a child, and he just had miraculously occurrences of things happen to him. He could lay a book on his chest and just absorb the information through that. And it's no question. It's undisputed that Cayce, amongst the people that really take it serious and have proved all of his, a lot of his stuff that's come true, his prophetic stuff and his knowledge base and how he could divine ideas. And that divining part probably is some hitch in that. And don't let us lose track and go back to that quantum, the other stuff we're talking about. I think there is a spiritual element. There is a definite spiritual attachment that we can learn things. It's like the cosmic field. It's to get off of the path of being too new agey about it. There is like a divine consciousness. Almighty God knows and understands all of it. The answer is out there. Our spirit can pick up on this. Our spirit is integrated in all that's. It's like
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I asked you just a few minutes ago about what do you think is the rule, the physical rule or the spiritual, for that matter, holding all matter together. But biblically speaking, it says that He holds all things together by the power of His word. Is
Yeah.
it possible that the dark side has discovered the secret to that power and is able to reverse it or negate it, at least if not temporarily? And that goes to
Yeah.
the Mandela effect. In that, is it possible that the secret of time, which we know that the Creator is before, during, and after time, therefore time does not exist in that paradigm, is it that
Yeah.
they've discovered that as well?
I think so, because once you look at this thing about the ether, and if you've had the chance yourself, I hope to know that you had the chance to read this thing entirely or hear the audio. Did you catch that whole quantum shift thing
Yeah,
that
it's
I did?
awesome. Hmm.
The key ingredient is looking at the physical material of what CERN is looking after. And I'll give you kind of like a piece that's outside the report. And this is what makes this audio interview thing like this so great, because I can talk about stuff that goes beyond and adds to this report that I'm even going to do some second report I'm going to work on the next couple of months, and probably sooner. This whole feeling of this thing called the God particle. This when you were using the term, the word, and I want to help you with something here, because
Okay.
this is significant.
Right.
This is vitally important to understand from a biblical perspective. When you talk about the Bible, we have all this anecdotal stuff in between this stuff we could uniquely call God's word. And if a man would have, borrow your lawnmower and promise to bring it back, that's an operation of him giving his word. And if we single out the idea and understand this when we're reading the Bible, and I put this to the test for the Mandela thing for you and all the other ones out there. Get a hold of a copy of a book that's called Prayers That Avail Much. I've looked at a lot of the Mandela stuff. I've looked at a lot of the changes that does exist in the Bible. The only changes I can see that cannot be made to stuff that God Almighty Himself promised, that we can see as sworn testimony of promises God made, I haven't seen any changes in any of those, apart from all the other incremental stuff, and anecdotal stuff in between. There's something about that. Remember that the word means God's promises, and if you utilize that in your head and not get that mixed up with the other stuff, it'll help people a lot. But going back to this ether thing, this whole thing about CERN, people have carried on so much. There's some very good work and people can badmouth whoever they want, but the information's still there. It's still available to us, and I dare anybody. They can badmouth people like Steve Quayle and Tom Horn, whatever the hell they want to say about them. It doesn't matter to me. I go through and I look for information. I look for details. A lot of times that people put bad labels on people because there's some effort being made to hide what these people have discovered and uncovered. They did a series, Tom Horn did, called True Legends, with a young man by the name of Timothy Alberino. They did the recent one from the new book they did. There's a part that's called Holocaust of the Giants. They dealt specifically in this how the Native Americans, we're talking 600 years ago, had the capability of sitting out in the middle of the desert, nowhere, and no technology whatsoever, and used the process of witchcraft and alchemy to take human body parts and do rituals and open up portals and bring stuff through here. They've even witnessed and testified, these Native Americans, of the stories of their grandfathers of reptilian type creatures that come through these portals, and taught people. It would very much fall in the same category as the fallen angels, but in the 600-year time frame, more recent than even the stuff that was from way back. And they're standing there looking at it like, if they bring and open up portals with just using alchemy and witchcraft, what the hell? They didn't need it. They didn't have a CERN available to them to make this happen. So people are carrying on so much about CERN, open up portal stuff. This has been going on a lot longer before CERN was ever built. And my contention is that this thing, the man by the name of Paul LaViolette, he's a very good physicist. He's proven very definitively some of these things about something called the galactic superwave that emanates from the center of our solar system and the center of our galaxy. To be specific, what he has discovered in something called subquantum kinetics, and his website's called etheric.com for a reason. It all centers around, and he doesn't even use the word ether that much, but there are pages in his website that talk about ether, but he kind of is cagey about it. It's an untouchable subject. If you call this quantum stuff we know as dark matter, dark energy, dark flow, all these scientific terms, they are really covers and switchcraft that hides the origin of this stuff actually being ether and this specific thing called the God particle. I mean, why did these genified fools decide to call it the God particle? And it's this particle, this substance, this matter, is the fundamental, most singularly important substance in the whole of the universe. They have proven as a fact, Violet and others, and all the way back to Tesla, they knew for a fact that stars in our solar system, stars throughout the galaxy, the big, black holes, they emit this stuff that's called dark matter. It is truly ether. And at the fundamental, even sub-quantum level of the physics of everything we have anything to do with, gravity is this substance is the source of gravity. It's where gravity comes from. It has everything to do with why gravity exists. It is the force you were talking about, the invisible stuff within all particle matter that holds everything together. And a lot of the physicists back in the man by the Mendeleev that first invented the periodic table, he had done some, if you go back and look, the chemical conception of the ether that this man had worked on, and he pioneered and invented the periodic table we have today. He had 4 other singular elements on his periodic table chart that were etheric and ether particles, and they work faster than the speed of light. And if we did the research we need to do, and the part that science is really hiding and being hijacked today by this new age knowledge and technology, subversion, they're hiding the fact that this ether substance is the substance that our spirit is made of. It's the substance of the whole of God's creation, the thing we call the Holy Ghost, the power of God, the dunamis of God. It is this ether substance that is the source of everything and holds everything together, produces gravity. But the key ingredient is this stuff exists and operates above the speed of light. I'll give you an example. When you've heard about black holes, and they have this particular ring that exists at a certain edge of the black hole that's called the event horizon. As things fall into the black hole, the reason why this event horizon, everything is dark past that point, is the simple fact that at that area, when things of any matter particles are falling toward the black hole, it has reached the speed of light. And at that point, from our perspective and our visible ability to see, that's our limitation. It has exceeded the speed of light, and in our mind, it ceased to exist. In actuality, it has just transcended what our capability of operating and seeing. It's transcended that. And angels walk to and fro throughout the earth. Ghosts walking to and fro throughout the earth. We've detected these things. We've seen them. We've analyzed them. We know they exist. And angels, like when Jesus talked to the disciples after the day of Pentecost, he came back and visited them. He had to sit down and had a meal with them. He could see them. Guys could see him sitting there physically. But when he got up and left, he was able to walk through the side of the wall without opening the door. He didn't have to go through the door, just walk through the wall without opening it. He is capable of exceeding the speed of light. Angels, the same thing. They have a scientific piece of work they've done within the last 50 years. You can take, it's a very vast machine, and they've actually downsized it enough and experimented with it. Take something the size of a coffee cup, stick it in one of the smaller type machines, say about the size of a microwave. If you accelerate the particles of this object to above the speed of light, it disappears. It doesn't mean that it ceased to exist. It's just out beyond our capability to see it. You de-res it in that fashion. To bring it back in our realm, using magnetic fields and magnetic energy, you can actually reorganize the energy back into a lower energy form. Below the speed of light, it just reappears. This is the heart of what was discovered during the Philadelphia experiment.
All right, we got a number of questions that came in through our Fast Blast and right on our live chat going on now. Greg, let's get to a few of them real quick.
Sure.
And we don't want to spend an enormous amount of time on because there's so many. We want everybody's questions that we can get in. Just a quick one here from Phil, North Carolina. Do you believe that there will be a pole shift?
I can't be certain. I mean, if we could predict the future, if we could see it, there's a big, vast probability of it. This brown dwarf star that comes through every 3,600 years is an established scientific fact in the certain circles that do know this and have kept that, ridiculed and kept secrets. Yeah, I don't have any reason to think that that would be possible.
Okay.
Maybe 20 degrees, not much more than 25 degree shift. It ain't going to be like a full flip upside down thing.
Okay.
I think that's not likely,
All right.
maybe. But
all right. There's a raging battle, of course, on the internet about whether or not the Earth is flat. Don't know how or who started that. Where do you come down on that one?
that is one of the most big subversive things that they've come across, this flat Earth thing. There's a whole other branch of people who look into this very closely and examine this. If you do this phony flat Earth perspective and idea, this will take a few moments to talk about this before we hit any more questions,
All right.
because this is significantly important. People can say whether or not the Illuminati exist. We know Freemasons exist. I had two uncles who were in the Freemasons. You can know that Shriners exist. Going back up higher levels to get to the Illuminati part, people can debate all they want whether or not these people exist. But, go back to the Knights Templar and all the breakup of that in succeeding centuries. Yes, they exist. There's a hidden branch that does. These guys are gamers. They just love playing, sophisticated games and mind games on people. And in our modern time, having the internet available to us, they have fun playing with this. There's a branch that's hidden that's called Discordia. They call it that because they sow discord. They gain and it's a point and honor system where they have fun coming up with these schemes. If you go back to the 20s and 30s, even in the turn of that's probably where most of the flat earthers started. You go back that far. They play games on people's minds to see in the point system on the internet with YouTube and other stuff. Their game plan is they gain privileges and points in Discordia.
Well, Greg, let me interrupt you there. Doesn't the idea of the Mandela Effect fall in that category?
Not necessarily. I mean, in what perspective? In what form would you say?
Well,
that?
it's obviously disrupting. We use the word term loosely. In fact, I would say the disruptors you're talking about, I would also call them as sort of a deep state right there, a deep state of the internet or the deep state of discord. That doesn't just work in politics. Seems like it works in research as well. But no, the idea that somebody could go and change the writings in a book, wouldn't fall as sort of the point system of getting people to believe that could actually happen?
Well, on the flat Earth side of it, it's more impossible to prove that because you can take actual satellites and put up in the atmosphere. And major pilots, you can't get any major pilots in the world that would come forward as whistleblowers. That would be the thing that they need. The Discordian people need to be able to try to prove this flat Earth thing has any relative perspective truth to it. It just doesn't work. I mean, with all the other, but here's the fault. Here's the flaw of using this Discordian thing called flat Earth. If you want to believe that, you have to dismiss the properties of the sun, the proof and knowledge we have about the sun.
Okay.
It disproves all this stuff about ether. It hides, and it's a type of switchcraft in its own way.
All right.
Try to get people
all right, Gary, let's move on here. Question came in. Have you ever seen the sun flickering? And if you have, what's causing that?
Okay, that goes to the heart of this other matter with the quantum shift stuff. This thing that comes through every 3,600 years. It's been established fact, even all back to the Reagan era, that they've been planning for this. The idea, if you go back and look up this thing called the Herschel Space Telescope and look at its origins, and you'll find that it was conceived, the idea to build the Herschel Space Telescope is like a third larger than the Hubble Space Telescope. 27 years before they would ever launch, they were working on this telescope. for the sole purpose of using it in the infrared range. They want to see this brown dwarf star. There is something called induction. If anybody knows, if they had an induction stove, you put an iron skillet on it, it'll heat it up. You put your hand up there, it does nothing. There's an induction magnetic field pulse that exists from this brown dwarf star that interacts with our sun during this time of its circling, passing through every 3,600 years. This induction energy is coming off this brown dwarf. And if people in the scientific world, and there's people behind the scenes that come forth and tell you how big this object is, apart from the other orbiting objects around it, it itself is 5 times the size of Jupiter. If you do the actual math and see what this looks like on a piece of paper compared to the sun itself, it is 1/2 the size of our sun. That's how massive this brown dwarf star is. And the amount of pulse that comes off this has interacted with our sun to the degree it's what is actually causing our sun of ours to turn white. It's the reason why the sunspot energy, the sunspot thing is a farce in itself as well. As far as the solar minimum and solar maximum, all that chart actually does is measure the number of sunspots. It does not measure the overall energetic output of the sun that we know has definitively increased and gotten much brighter. And at some points, when these energetic discharges between the brown dwarf and the sun occur, it can cause massive, ejections of light from the sun. Several years ago, there was several people, even the guy by the name of he's a guy that works hand in hand with Clef High. What was his name? He does a survival blog, and he's a major guy with financial stuff. George Erz, his name. He had people write into him that talked about some of these things, even at night, of major type flares that they could see out of the corner of their eye. And people wondered if it was just extra gamma ray energy, escaping through the holes in the atmosphere that they were seeing. But yet, like a pair of kids walking through their kitchen, and both of them had seen this flash, one looked at the other and said, "Did you see that?" The strange thing was, if you notice these flashes, even at night, 11 o'clock at night, there's some magnetic energy that actually able to make the flash occur physically at even 11 o'clock at night. People as far as Australia in the last 4 or 5 years have seen these flashes, and they're just very instantaneous and momentously small in their moment of existing. But when you have a pair of people that see it both, it's not like a little axon or some of the little cones and rods inside your eye, and it's not like a little burst of energy that hit one of them.
Well, Greg, wasn't there recently? I just saw an article that some sort of large light apparition appeared on a New York City bridge. Did you see that?
Yes, I did. Yes, sir, I did. Yeah.
That's a pretty massive scale on that one there. All right, let's get to another quick. Let's keep it a little shorter here. Is the ether energy orgone energy?
They're probably one and the same, or very singularly close to in relation, because, like I said, what Mendeleev found on his periodic table was 4 other specific elements that was separate. It's like he described them as being kind of air-like elements, gaseous elements that even Einstein, researched with some of the help with Tesla and von Neumann and a man by T. Townsend Brown to work in advance of all this Philadelphia experiment. Sometime we should do a whole show on some of these individual subjects.
Oh yeah, sounds great, man. You've got a lot of information coming to us tonight. All right, and by the way, those of you just joining the broadcast on our Newsmaker line tonight is Greg Coleson. If you have a question for Greg, you can put it in the live chat going on now. Jade will send it over to us, or you can click on the Fast Blast link, which is a direct email client. Quick note then, here's more questions coming in. Why are gravity waves important, and how do they affect us?
The galactic superwaves that Paul LaViolette talked about was, in his comprehension of it, it's the precursors to some of the major ice ages we've had in the past. And the more difficult side of this is these waves occur. It's an energetic boost of actual ether, vaporous energy from the center of our solar system. We experience a good amount of it on small boost scales from our sun, because all these major stars are the sources of these unknown particles that Stanford University report. They at first thought it was neutrinos, but the big major question of this stuff was, how could something that is not supposed to interact with anything, that could pass through all matter, able to affect matter that shouldn't be able to be changed, as in radioactive materials? And it poses a bad question, is what does this ether do? If you go back to ancient history, it explains, it answers the question of longevity of life before Noah's flood and how man was able to live to be 1,000 years old. The enterprisemission.com, if you've ever went to that,
I've heard of it.
The guy who lives in Santa Fe, off the top of my head, because I've had a long week and it's been tiring and stuff. I'll think of his name in a minute. But if you go to enterprisemission.com, you'll look at some of the website material he did from a number of years ago. He did a work on this thing with it's a Bulova Accutron watch, and he readjusted it. And in its conception back in the 50s and 60s, when this device was introduced as a good high quality, very accurate timepiece, it was able to pick up on ether emissions when they discovered this when they put this time watch and clock on some of their satellites. It got out far enough from the atmosphere and outside the atmosphere of our Earth and far enough out into space. It was the interaction without their blockage of the Van Allen belt and the stuff. It was actually causing the clocks to be wrong, and they had to do some studies and find out why this is. Well, these things were detecting fluctuations in ether. When he went to South America around some of the large pyramids, Pyramid of the Moon, Pyramid of the Sun, some of those with the snake step sides, some of those ancient pyramids in South America, he made a discovery that the people living around these pyramids had an extraordinary longevity. Some of these people, you look at them in their 80s, they look like they're in their 50s. And he was noting the fact near and around these pyramids, this Bulova Accutron watch that he had made adjustments to was picking up larger concentrations of ether around pyramid structures. You go back to ancient farther times, you find out the actual building of Giza Pyramid was a machine in the Enoch time of period that they have. A lot of people have tracked back, and Hebrew people and from Israel have tracked back the fact that these things were built in the time of Enoch. And this was an actual machine. And the premise that comes across from the movie Stargate is not incorrect. It's 100% accurate in what they were surmising, that this Gaul, they talk as a fictional character in the story Stargate, was using these sarcophaguses to actually regenerate the human body and make it have more longevity and make it more immortal. After the time of Noah, people started not aging as long. Methuselah lived to be 900, and I was like 86, 96. All these major patriarchs of the ancient times of the Bible, some of them lived to be, 300. It's like 330 years for Adam.
Greg, where did they get the technology from?
It wasn't you mean to build the pyramid? No doubt. God would show, had shown Enoch, and a lot of it can be pretty much, pointed to the fallen angels, because the time of the big giants, Nephilim, fallen angel people have passed it off as being Anunnaki technology, but the Anunnaki just may very well be another name for these large, what we'd think is aliens, these Nordic-looking dudes, like some of them may be 12 or 13 foot tall, as being angels, fallen angels, various sizes and types that we know in the Bible in different accounts. If they came to Earth and took on a human form, and they had children and offspring, and a lot of these people before the Noah's flood, because of the mass concentrations of ether that you could rename from the original book of Genesis, you can find the word firmament in there. And when you read the Quantum Shift Conundrum Report, you see the interconnections between all this ether and the firmament and all these different diverse things being spoke of as being all the one and the same substance. And these sarcophagus that was built in the tower in the Pyramid of Giza was used to be as a rejuvenation chamber. It had nothing to do with the Egyptians having built it. It was before their time. The original Sphinx itself had a strange lion head on it. It explains today when the Egyptians discovered it sticking out of the sand, they destroyed the lion head by making a newer, smaller head. And we look at the entire Sphinx body, it answers the question, why is the head so much smaller than the rest of the body? They have found artifacts on Mars that fit and match this lion premise. This time of this, the constellation Leo favors into that to a big time frame shift back to thousands and thousands of years when all these things, it's a massive amount of stuff. We could do several shows on this, Daniel. We could do several shows on different topics.
Okay, well, we're going to have to, Greg. All right, let's get a final question before we go to the break. This is from Philip out of Georgia. Can gravitational waves cause a time shift?
The ether from the galactic superwave that has occurred and has gone going, my premise is this, that because the way the ether strikes the Earth, there's this thing that's taking place where, like 1992, a particular song came out by the Southern group called Alabama. I'm in a Hurry, a particular song. Right. It was the #1 song in 1992. Nobody ever really asked the question, why was this so prominent and important? The bigger question is, why was there such a shift and change and all this, and everybody feeling like they're in a hurry to do things, can't get enough time to do the same stuff they did 2, 3, 4, or 5 years prior to that. Mm-hmm. There was some sort of a major shift in time that caused everybody to seem like they're being rushed. Ask the question again so I don't miss something.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll think about that question because we got to go to the break right now. Greg, I think we've got a link to that there in the in your bio section. What can people find when they click on that and download that PDF file?
The audio file. It's an actual audio.
Yeah, you have audio. Yeah, you have audio and PDF.
Yes,
what I saw.
Yes, the PDF book, you download that, and it's a PDF file. The audio, the link that's on the Internet Archive, is an audio file. It's an audio book version of the actual PDF. The best thing to do is download the PDF and listen to the audio as you read the book, and there's extra features in the audio book that enhance what's in the actual PDF.
All right, very good. All right, Greg, just stay right there. We're going to bring you back in about 5 minutes, okay?
All right.
All right, very good. All right, everybody, you're watching and or listening to the Edge Television broadcast. We're going to be right back with our guest, Greg Coleman. And if you have a question for him, you can click on the Fast Blast link or join him in the live chat and put your question in there. We're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll be right back. Stay where you are. And welcome back to the Edge Television broadcast. My name is Daniel Ott. If you missed any of the exciting first hour with Greg Coleman, it will begin to replay in our main player directly after the show. We'll put it up in our YouTube channel. We'll podcast it and put it into our TuneIn Radio playlist. That TuneIn Radio program that we have, it plays 24 hours a day. All of our programming in sort of a queues thing. It'll play across any device and any platform as well. Let's go back to our newsmaker line and welcome back our guest, Greg Coleman. Greg, welcome back.
Hello, sir.
Wow, what an exciting first hour. We covered a lot of ground there, Greg, and I want to start the second part of this program talking about whether or not there is such a thing, or have you personally experienced any Mandela effect?
Yes, indeed. There's so much physical evidence on this subject that it's astounding how many people have memories of 30 years ago, and whole subjects, this one in particular, in my case, okay. A number of years ago, I'd seen this movie. It's called Sunshine. You can look that one up. It's quite interesting. I'd had this occurrence where I had had a flash memory of actually having been in the theater to see it, but I had not been to the theater to see it, and it was such a time-altering shift in my mind. It was bothersome. The first time since that, I didn't think nothing of it then. It was just a weird occurrence of something that it was just strange. It's the ether thing. The first one I'd seen that really kind of bugged me was that movie, Sex and the City. And it's Sex and the City now that you see the DVD when you're walking through Walmart. I stared at this going, well, maybe that was just, for this actual movie, but the TV series that everybody remembered seeing that remembered it is called Sex in the City. If anybody wants to question this and dispute it, there is proof. There's actual YouTube video proof of the Golden Globe Awards and a number of occurrences of this one show winning so many awards and being named in the awards of Sarah Jessica Parker come up here and, for whatever part, that they were given an award for, Sex in the City, over and over and over and over again, this one YouTube video. There's many others. It's just astounding. Seeing the VW symbol, there's guys that have went back to the original symbol as far back as the 1930s, around 38, 39, have seen one of the original symbols that before this change occurred. It's one of the older ones that still have the VW connecting together with no little space between the V and the W that's now existent in the current symbol. There's many people have remembered Volvo not having this strange little arrow pointing up in the northeast corner of it. There's vast number of these things. A Gorton, it's not a normal common name. If you look at the etymology and the baby names of this Gorton, it's Gordon. We've always known Gordon. We've always heard the name Gordon everywhere you go. Gordon Seafood. Changed to Gorton Seafood. I went through the store, looked at it. I'm looking at it like, well, why did they, what is this? I looked up the etymology and the word. They have ascribed this to being part of there was a town back in Europe. It's called Gore Town. That's this thing was named from, and it was supposed to have been some sort of a major incident that even historians have questioned and disputed having any memory of this event ever having occurred, and much evidence of it. That the Saxons were invaded by another tribe of other indigenous type Anglo-Saxon, I forgot the other group, but it slaughtered the entire town, wiped everybody out, and they called it Gore Town. But yet the commonality of the name Gorton doesn't exist much on the scale of names that people can verify versus Gordon that does exist. That's just a few examples. There's multitudes.
Well, in your PDF file that we talked about, I guess it's also in your in the audio there. You said that the future is being rearranged. What is the purpose?
That goes back to the heart of that question at the back of the break. And if this thing that's occurred with this galactic superwave has hit the Earth, outside of time and space, we have this realm that we can consider the second heaven. And the trouble is, it's a separation between our lower dimension here, where we are at the speed of light, to some dimension above the speed of light, where in the Bible it depicts it as being without time or space. There's no time or distance in the realm of the spirit, is the way it's described in the Bible. So this galactic superwave would hit the Earth, and the multiple occasions it's hit in the past, something is unique about this particular time in which we're in. And there's different kinds of small level evidences from ancient records of this same sort of occurrence having happened and disrupted society several times before in the past. I suspect that this galactic superwave has struck the Earth in such a manner, being above the spirit is called superluminal. That's another term. People don't use it much because they don't know what that means. But superluminal actually means above the speed of light. It's striking the Earth at far distant times in the past and altering the positions of things, altering the outcomes of things, and from a past perspective, hitting the Earth back then, it rearranges the future in all the way up to the point in our future. And so when these waves start to take place, it's a wonderment of our own mind to think what kind of things and effects we could take as we're being sped up from that song from the 1992 from Alabama. There are actual physical videos that I've seen, snippets of that people have passed me through as evidence of atomic clocks. They have witnessed a 1/3 of a second difference from clock, estimates and evidence from 40 years ago, 50 years ago, from what it was in the 90s. How is it that the clock started running at 1/3 of a second faster?
If there was any speeding up or slowing down, there would be different outcomes, different things would have to change somewhere. And I think maybe because it's such at a small level that we're getting these sort of small level changes as we can perceive them, like the End of Queen song. I've read a bunch of them. A lot of people say that the Bible is being changed, various things. And I thought you actually introduced in the first hour, for those of you who didn't see it, it sounded like you were introducing the idea that the promises cannot be changed, but various other sort of extraneous things could be changed. But that reminds me of a movie, and I don't know if you saw it because you mentioned several movies, Greg. Have you seen the movie Coherence? Coherence, yes. And it's about it's about an asteroid is passing by, and it is directly affecting outcomes and creating alternate outcomes of various people's lives, and they're sort of interacting together. So you're sort of describing that kind of thing. But if things have been changed and our future has been rearranged, let's just say the future is now, because this is the future from last week, how do we know that we haven't been changed already? How would we even perceive that?
In what way would you say?
Well, let's just say that for those, some of us have seen the changes, say the Mandela Effect. Well, some others have not. So those that have, would they have been altered to perceive that, whereas others have not been altered? Because obviously Mandela's not changing everything. This time warp, this speeding up or slowing down isn't really, not everybody is saying they see these changes or perceive what's changed, but some have. So how do we account for that?
This kind of goes to the heart of the question when people talk about CERN and wondering whether or not some of these changes have been altered by way of time travel. To give like a good example, there's been a few, there's a particular series that came out recently called Dimension 404. If you haven't seen that, try to pick it up and watch it.
Okay.
There's one particular thing in there where the girl is, she remembers a TV show from when she was a child, and all of a sudden at some point in her life in the future, the TV show has been erased. The premise is that if you go back in time and stop the show from ever existing, in the time travel type perspective, there should be no actually evidence that there should be no remembrance of it. In the case of the movie called Shazam, that the guy that was the major actor in that has been refusing to believe or acknowledge that this movie ever exists. His name is Sinbad. He's put up a $5,000 reward to get people to come forward to see if they can prove that this exists. Yet there's a YouTube video that's very distinctly that has snippets of this actual videotape movie that shows him standing there talking to the two kids, talking to children, bits and pieces from the movies exhibited in this YouTube. And he says it shows that he's there. There's evidence that exists. If this was like a time travel type incident, the movie would have never been made. There should be no physical evidence. The question is, how would you go back in time a couple of weeks after the video was released on this movie and take it forward into the future and hand it off to somebody and let them have it to keep? Go back in time and then prevent that movie from ever being made. You could not, you go back to the future and find evidence of the videotape because it was completely stopped. That's the biggest unusual component of this entire quantum shift that's occurring now, that there's all this residue, there's all this evidence. Even Rodin, the famous statue of the thinker, with his hand on his knee, and his elbow on his knee, and is resting his chin on what many people remember as being an open fist. There are even tiny statues that people have made in memorabilia from museum pieces as little objects that you could take home, and it shows many of them of somebody, the artist that created these little artifacts that are remnants of what exists from the past, from solid memories of people's memory, that he's got his chin on his fist. Now the actual Rodin that you go over in Europe and see it physically in person, he has his chin on his open back of his hand. His open hand, his chin on the back of his hand. All these things are broken pieces. Like the song you said, "We Are the Champions." And it finishes off of the world. There's a quirky little YouTube video that's got George Clooney and a few other actors sitting in the back of a car, like something peaceful, like Saturday Night Live or Mad TV, and they're listening along to the song and the radio as the car's going along, and they're just talking along with the song, and there's this dramatic pause at the end of the song because it didn't conclude how they remember it. They distinctly have significant memories of this. Wow. And one of the actors just blurted out, "of the world," because they felt like it was a break in their continuity of what we always remember. The bigger one that I have in my report singles out a song by Prince called "Let's Go Crazy," which actually it injects the understanding of why he died and why he killed himself. It was revealed to Prince as a show of force of how deeply this can affect people's lives. If you remember the song from years back, if you've heard it enough times, you've heard it, memorized it. It's not hard to get. Thousands of people have memorized exactly the same thing. Dearly beloved, we've been gathered together to celebrate this thing called life.
Right.
If you find the existent song today doesn't say celebrate, it says get through. How could you find the words get through to be an uplifting?
It says celebrate. I know that one. I mean, everybody knows that one. That's not, now there are those that say that it's really, we've had that discussion on this program many times. In fact, we had a debate not too long ago with a couple guys, but they said that one claimed it's just mass hallucination, mass forgetfulness. I mean, you don't subscribe to that?
the idiocracy side of that answer is so easily dispelled. It's almost it falls in the category of discordia for anybody to stand there and tell people that it's just misremembering stuff. It's so ridiculous. I almost can't use that word.
Wow.
The people that have lived their life and actually are professionals that have memorized the periodic table, scientific people, memorized important chemical formulas to operate and do things in their own life, putting together nitroglycerin in the laboratory. Mm-hmm. You can't, accidentally make a mistake and put the wrong ingredient or the wrong amount and blow yourself up. People that are professional singers that have memorized all the songs they've ever sung, where would this come in that people have sit and watched movies hundreds of times, over and over again, seen Star Wars, seen it. How could you possibly tell hundreds of thousands of people across the world that they remembered that, Luke, I am your father?
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. Now I think it says, Luke, I'm your brother. Hey, all right, we got this question. And I think also there's a Bible scriptures that used to say the lion lays down with the lamb. I think it says now the dinosaur lays down with the lamb. Yeah. So I mean, it's changing every day. You got to check in with that thing. It's changing every day, Greg. All right, here's a question from Dreamwalker out of the live chat. It says, does this mean that our world is not real, like the movie The Matrix or the holodeck on Star Trek?
It's a strange premise for people to think. If you read the quantum shift, it kind of spells out some of that idea too, in a certain pattern of evidence, that the premise that we live in a holographic universe, the actual technology that we understand and able to build and produce as holograms don't have the physical hard solidity to them. You can take an actual holographic lens projection of a mirror and actually use that hologram to actually divert a laser beam. But that's about as far as solidity goes in the realm of the production of holographic material that we can produce today. To presume that we live in a holographic universe, it goes to a singular, really interesting thing about the physics that existed more than 65 years ago, that Einstein and all these men were looking at the most fundamental particle. There's an interesting book that's called Beyond Einstein that goes through the process and premise of looking at all the possibilities of what is the singular most fundamental particle in the universe. Uh-huh. And one of the premises in the book, talks about string theory and all that. It's been dispelled, string theory has, because it only works in the subquantum level and the quantum particle level. It doesn't work in the cosmological level outside of just being physical matter that we know of up in the solid world we live in. String theory fails. It doesn't work. But something strange happens, that light has the right sort of properties up into the time even when I was in high school. There was big major debates and discussions whether light actually had any physical matter properties to it. Mm-hmm. And they started to discover that mass was found in photons, which gives it the understanding of why you can take a laser beam and cut a hole in a diamond. To think that we live in a holographic universe seems to be an interesting premise. People could link that up and think that we're like in a holodeck idea with, like on Star Trek, where you could have little fizzles in the technology and maybe there would be glitches and stuff. Mm-hmm. There's something about the lack of true solidity in that. But when you go into the deeper portions of things about the ether, and you go in the God particle side of it, and the particle of the Higgs boson, and look at the fact that they're searching so very desperately, there is a more major significant thing I can talk about at the end of this broadcast that I want to fill in about what CERN's looking for. Mm-hmm. That goes from a biblical perspective. That's not in my report, but I want to share with everybody, and don't let me forget to get to that.
All right, I just made a note on that. Well, our topic, of course, is what is the quantum shift conundrum, and somebody just wrote in. So, what is the quantum shift conundrum, Greg?
It's a better name for the Mandela Effect. It's kind of a despicable thing, to pin it all on this Mandela guy. Many years in our case, like 15 years ago, there was a phenomenon that was called alive again, where people had distinct memories of certain people had been alive when they heard the TV broadcast that, they had just died recently. Bob Keyshawn was one of the major ones that had the largest numbers at that time of people having remembered that he had been, died already. he had already physically passed on. Yet, when the reports came out that he died, it befuddled people how it is that, how come we have remembrances of him actually having already died? It's one of the major things in this report that goes to the question of where was Mandela at the time when all these other people were being remembered as having passed away and had
Right.
other people
Okay.
memories
Okay.
of, go ahead.
Okay. All right. We have this recent sort of news event. A company called Three Squared has begun microchipping their employees. Should we read
Yes.
anything into that other than convenience, or is there a darker, sinister plot ahead for the rest of us?
It could very well easily fit into a portion of the future where we have this thing called the mark of the beast. It could very well fit into that. Somewhere about the time frame of 2001, 2002, there was a major article that came out on NBC Article News before it was called MSNBC. There was an article that was called "If It's Broke, No Need to Fix It." It talked about the development, and we're talking about a number of years back, man. There's this little tiny microchip that they were working on that they had been able to build a self-repairing chip that was a tenth the size of a grain of sand, that had the capability of having, at that time, as much computer power as a 2-pound laptop in this one micro-sized chip. Now, I had, previous to that, back in the 90s, had interacted with some of the people in the CIA fields, NSA fields of heavy, deep science, of working on different things that were able to, put microchips in people that they had surmised, and they were talking about then, almost 25 years ago, of being able to put a chip in the hand of a human being. The chip would not be just under the skin, it would be embedded in the bone, so you could not remove it. This technology that came out from the news piece back in the early 2000s verifies my conclusion about the fact that they wanted to build a chip to use for like RFID purposes. But the fact the article is no longer there, there's no internet archive, you can go back and find it. And it was a very distinct article about this chip that was a tenth the size of the grain of sand. This would be more like the kind of thing that they would develop. And imagine how much farther along with this. In the secret space program, there's people that's come out from behind the scenes that when their fathers were still alive back in the 50s and 60s, that they told their sons they're working on technology that it was so astounding to them then. It was at least 1,000 years in advance of what we have. And that was, we're talking about in the 60s, almost 40 years ago, 50 years ago.
Wow.
So imagine how much farther along we are now.
Well, I would have said, and you've mentioned a secret space program a couple times, Greg. What, real quickly, what's going on with that?
It's a breakaway civilization. There is no dispute amongst the people that have seen these TR-3Bs. I got to see a very significant piece of hardware back in the 80s. And it was even in my younger years, as far back as 1976, 75. I was a youngster back in, a little place called Aztec, New Mexico, which features prominently in the real hard science researchers of the UFO community. They know about that little place called Aztec. It's mentioned in the very first episode of the X-Files, the season 10, where Mulder's talking about, different things dealing with Roswell. If you've seen that, Daniel, if you hadn't, go back and watch it.
Yeah.
It was very significantly strange that Mulder is speaking about all this UFO stuff and all this stuff, and he broke free from that little point and said, more importantly, Aztec. People want to do research about good UFO stuff, Hangar 18, all that, go back and look at that. And what was the question again?
Wow. Don't know, but I can tell you what, we're going to go to the next question from Georgia. It says, does see how we segue from right out of that one. Oh, by the way, I have a picture of that craft you mentioned in our background right now.
Oh, yes.
Does the electric universe theory have any effect on CERN, or is CERN causing it? Well, I'll tell you what, we'll leave that toward the end there, because you mentioned that we want to talk about that toward the end. Let's get to another question. This is, again, a fast blast question as soon as it comes up. It says, do portals only allow beings to enter our world, or are they wormholes used for travel?
I would suspect that our ability to teleport, and there's been people you've probably interviewed and other people that's talked about maybe, teleporting from as far as from here to Mars. You've heard of that technology, and people talking about.
I've had several of them on the show.
There. Yes, sir. And it's very likely. It's very likely we have wormhole technology. some of the stuff that's more significantly interesting is in that new TV series that's called Dark Matter.
Mm-hmm.
And they have this thing called the blink drive. The blink drive has the capacity and capability to just go from one point to another in a flicker of an instant. I think the technology is probably advanced at least that level at this point.
All right, we have this question this is from our live chat. Did a light year ship go to the comet Elenin?
Light year ship. That'd be like the Heaven's Gate sort of thing.
It could be. I'm not familiar with that myself.
Well, in the Comet Elenin subject line, if you want to go back and watch a very interesting movie that has some of the most unusual premises all bound up in one singular film, it's called Life Force. Henry Mancini did the music for that movie. Go look that one up, watch it. You don't want to miss that, Daniel, if you haven't seen it.
Wow,
Okay,
I certainly will. Greg, you've given me a whole viewing list of movies here, man. So I'm going to be watching movies for the next week. So I hope they're all on Netflix. All right, here's another question. It says, if we live in a holodeck, why do we have entertainment for the masses?
Entertainment for the masses in holodeck. It kind of makes it seem silly that we live in the holodeck idea, if that's the case. A very good movie on that premise, though, that does make that raises the question of that holodeck thing is called The 13th Floor. Write that one down, everybody, and go watch that one. It's a premise of being inside a computer simulation, and it's so real that the people in it have no clue that it exists. But there's edge limitations, and a lot of people amongst the flat Earth idea theory has pointed to that 13th floor being another aspect of the premise of why we have boundaries on Earth that would spell out why there's no Antarctica, which is silly, because there's a lot of stuff. The biggest thing is of this flat Earth business is to hide what's really going on in space. It's to hide the brown dwarf star, and it's hiding a major discovery that's about to come out in the next year about the stuff they're finding in Antarctica.
Wow, I'm looking forward to that. All right, going back to the chat, got a question here. It says, and I don't know how related it is to the show, but maybe you've addressed it. It says, in the movies, we're talking about movies, Field of Dreams, there's a stupid mystery voice talking to Kevin Costner in the cornfield. What was that all about?
The ghost kind of an idea, build it and they will come, except it now says build it and he will come. That's a big question there. So you are convinced that this Mandela effect is real? I have no doubt of it. There's too much scientific evidence the scientific world is scared out of their mind about it's as bad as what I was saying about Prince. When he heard what had changed in his life with this song that he wrote and knew very distinctly, it caused him to go, he was taking fentanyl already overloaded on it. He kept himself awake 6 days straight, died in an elevator. There's a massive amount of interconnections in that reveal, if there's no such thing as the Mandela effect, then why is all these interconnections fit? Go ahead.
Interconnections. Okay. Well, all right. Well, let's go to the next question here. And I'm not sure how you're going to answer this, but it says, can you prove that time is real?
On the physics level, I will explain this, and it's very simple. It's very, very simple. Time is not really an actual physical space. It's not an actual dimension. It is a measurement, actually, of the movement of matter. That's all it really actually is. And when you do the quantum shift report, you'll see my little report that I have in there, a piece of it. And let's play with numbers a little bit.
Okay.
And from a biblical perspective, this is very significant and very interesting.
Okay.
Ancient records go back to the account that we used to live in what they had called two heavens, a lesser heaven and a greater heaven. That's all that exists. Okay. Everything exists in a three-dimensional space pattern. That's all the dimensions there really are of actual physical matter. The idea that we live in 11 dimensions is physics' attempt and discovery of something about this below the speed of light condition that we are in, and that is an entirely other show, and I can't wait till we get to that. But the understanding is this: the number 11 and numbers do matter. The number 17 is significant. The number 7 is significant. If you were to count it out and measure it out in your mind, 3 dimensions, and from a biblical perspective, for the biblical people, that there's like the first heaven, second heaven, third heaven. Paul speaks of it. Many parts of the Bible speaks of that. Another show that we can do to explain what this under heaven we're in, this below the speed of light condition, how it came about, how it exists, and why it exists. If we wanted to figure out why there's no fourth dimension, it's not really a dimension. It's an energetic field. There's barriers between these realms that we call the lesser, greater heavens. All these three distinct areas of cosmology that even the ancients understood and observed. The heaven where God resides as a distinct, understanding. I'm looking at the clock and I'm keeping an eye on it.
Okay.
This understanding that this idea we live in three dimensions, and then above the speed of light, there's another three-dimensional realm. Above the speed of light squared, there's another dimension. It's a greater heaven. If we were to map this out in physics format, I'll just go better to answer the question for the lady. Probably was a lady. It just smells like, for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe it's my intuition picking up. Wow. The idea that the four-dimensional thing that we live in, it's the measurement of actual matter and movement of matter. It's my brain's going so fast I can't even keep up myself. The idea that we have, it's not a physical space. It's just the movement in particles. If you take things down to, and this is a premise that science has asked the question, if you could take a matter and freeze it all the way down to, what they call the 0 point, what would happen? What would take place? You go back to the Big Bang Theory, and the idea was that the universe had collapsed and then got all the way down there and froze, and all the matter in the universe fused and produced a nuclear-type fusion reaction, then a fission reaction, erupted, exploded, and scattered everything out. If you could take, and they have not been able to do this yet,
right,
to do down to absolute zero, they've not been able to take matter that far, because would it be possible to take matter and freeze it to the point to where all the actual physical electrons orbiting the actual protons and neutrons, would it be possible to cause that moment of time to stop, that moment of movement to stop that we call time? Would it be possible, and what would occur? Would it be like an antimatter explosion? What would be the purpose? What would be that? Since we can't duplicate it, that goes into a whole other show too, though. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I've already got like 15 shows. We got to have you back on, Greg, so hope you're ready. So, wow. All right, man, this is fascinating stuff. Here's a question then from MR2U2. It says, any idea why the shadow of the moon during the pending eclipse is only 70 miles wide?
Even as though we think that the orbit of the moon around the Earth is perfectly circular. It's an impossibility. That's also another show that goes back to explaining how and why the moon is having a perfect circular orbit, that we never see the backside of the moon. That even it has, like our Earth orbiting the sun, we have these moments of being closer to the sun and further to the sun. So one of these perigees and apogee moments, the moon is going to be slightly closer, and it's going to reveal much more of the corona of the sun. That would pretty much, I think, best answer the question. The moon has its moments of being slightly closer and slightly far away. I hope that answers the question correctly.
Okay. Is anything celestially abnormal going to happen because of this upcoming eclipse? Is it just a normal cyclical thing, or are we going to see more Mandela Effect? Is time going to stop? I mean, is there anything like that going to happen?
There's a lot of feeling, and you've heard people probably discuss, in just conversations on the show and people and stuff, and even in your walking life outside the show, you've probably heard people, and there's a strange occurrence in the last several years of this agitation that everybody has been able to feel, that's building, that there's some sense that something is going to be erupting upon the world scene that's so dramatic that alters life as we know it. And it's just one of those markers. I do believe there's occasions that superstition weighs in more heavily in these matters, on these cases like this next one. But the realm of possibility is so vast and so great, God could use it as a sign for something. The more significant sign, I think, from a biblical perspective, is the one that occurs on September 23rd, when this woman with the crown of 12 stars, and the man-child, Jupiter, in the symbolism, is birthed from her womb. if you look up the YouTube videos speaking about this, it fits an actual biblical account in the book of Revelation that the Bible's talked about that has not that there's no math that can show and proof and verification that I've been able to see that this has occurred in the last 7,000 years. It could be something significant as a marker for end times that we are arriving at something. People have sensed it all over the world. It's agitating people to the point where there's more suicides, there's more nuttiness and disruptions, and there's a whole show we could do about the sun disease that Cliff High has talked about in that report, that Quantum Shift I've done.
All right. Well, there's 16 shows. Yeah, you just named another show we got to have. Well, I mean, agitation. I mean, it kind of fits to what's happening politically when you have it seems like the Democrats are so agitated they're liable to run to the White House and drag the president out of there. They just this constant angst and just complaining, and they hurt themselves and they go into safe spaces there. And then there's of course the normal rioting sort of outbreaks going around. To me, that sounds like discontentment and agitation. Is it that they're seeing Trump as their adversary, or is it this sort of worldwide sort of feeling that something's happening and they being the dumber sort of humans, that's how they express it?
It goes back to this thing too, even this ongoing thing that's occurred for quite a number of years. We expected some sort of a collapse that would be a chain reaction from the Greek collapse of their system. We now see Venezuela is crumbling, yet of all the collapse, and as bad as Venezuela has been, there hasn't been a chain reaction from that yet. So there's a particular piece within Cliff High's work that talks about something called centuries of revenge. It really is prominent, and he hasn't spoke of it probably from a karmic perspective. He's been hiding, saying anything more about it, but he alludes to it quite a number of times in his reports. That it seems like I call these people at the top and all the people that are operating all this mess we're in, I call them Evil Bastards Incorporated. And there's a good reason that should be a label that everyone keeps using about them, because it describes the condition that we're in this corporation. And it's like this TV series that came out a number of years ago. It's called Continuum, and they spoke of something called the corporate Congress. And if you look at the real factual development and production of things in the world we live in, it's an operation of policies and procedures. There aren't really actual laws in operation today like we think they are. It's not the same thing, and it's all plenty of verifiable proof of this. One thing that's called the Comprehensive Annual Financial Reports. If you go to CAFR1.com, you will find out where the real money's at in our country. And it tallies up above and virtuously very close right to $200 trillion at this point.
Okay.
These people have money. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. All right. Do you believe that time travel is already happening?
It's a strange thing, and I've been doing hard research on that to see if it's verifiably possible. There's a problem with time travel, and it goes to not being able to answer exactly whether or not there's alternate Earths and other alternate Earths that you could go to. If you were to go back into the past, and if you alter something enough significantly by the premise of actual real time travel, you would project when you come back to the future. Could you possibly come back to the future that you came from, because it would alter the direction and course? Every action we have today, that with every singular decision you makes the future that you are projecting into if you were to go into the future. Would you arrive in the future that's an actual future based on the changes that occurred after you left? There's many, many things about time travel that's so complex, it's hard to see that there's real proof that the time travel thing has occurred in ways. The past is probably more likely to go to. The future would be far more difficult, I would suspect.
But these outbursts of Mandela effect here and there, don't they also have an effect on the future?
They do. And this is the thing that really comes to the hard physical evidence, the report that I'm working on, the Quantum Shift, the Road to Hard Change. It asks very serious questions about the changes of the Earth's formation of the continents and how they have altered, how the human anatomy has been very physically and significantly changed. Many in the doctor community, the medical professional community, many doctors have had to go back to school and actually learn up on the differences and changes in human anatomy that they have distinctly saw that it's not the same as it was. The liver being twice its size, the slight alteration of where the heart is in the chest, all these minute changes, the size of the human skull, the shape of the brain itself, the brain stem and pons and all these different portions of the mental apparatus.
Mm-hmm.
It's they've been altered, and it goes to the heart of a question. If there's more changes, how much more can we take?
Are you familiar with somebody named Andrew Basagio?
I've heard the name, yes. I think that may be the guy that was talking about teleporting over to the Mars and seeing Obama.
That's true, and he also claims to be a time traveler, and he says he has proof. He has he was on the show, and he provided me with a picture somewhere around Gettysburg as a little boy, and he had this amazing story. I mean, he's a very competent and smart individual. He's an attorney.
Yeah.
He actually was running for one of the 1,500 people running for president of the United States. I'm not sure what party it was, probably the time travel party. But there's a picture of this little boy in the street with one shoe, and it's amazing. He just, without hesitation, he said, well, I was running down D Street, and I heard the president was around, and my foot stuck in the mud, and pulled my shoe off, and I coming around the bend, and then I saw some horses over there. I mean, he's just going, this the whole description. Now, you have to say either he's mentally unstable, he's off his meds, Obamacare kicked him off, whatever, or it actually happened. I mean, so until I can verify, I mean, how would I ever verify such a thing?
Yes, there's another good YouTube video, and this is an even stranger one still, and it's very good video footage and very good photographic footage of what the guy had seen and shown, that he was in his kitchen and there was some sort of a portal open up under his kitchen sink. What would be the odds of that and how that would occur? He crawled through this hole, and he had his camera with him from his phone, or a particular camera he had with him, and he met himself in the future, and he's standing next to the guy and took his picture of his arm, and the guy in the future is a very distinct older looking person like himself that has exactly the same arm tattoo as his younger self. The big question is this is why I say it's hard to see, it's hard to tell exactly how much this time travel stuff and what was the premise of it. What is
was
there
that
some demonic force operating this?
Well, Greg,
we don't understand?
was that the guy that claimed he went into a portal and got an alternative Beatles record collection?
I don't remember that part, but that could very well be.
There is. Google that. There's, and I've downloaded. I've listened to it. It's on my playlist. It says alternative Beatles that somebody got from the future, and I guess is in a different dimension. It certainly sounds like the Beatles or something they come up with. It's really weird. It says now here's the question: said, could somebody travel in the past and come back to the present and be their own grandpa?
There's some interesting premises that you could go back in the past and actually become your own father or grandpa. It might be. With the time travel thing, it's very elusive, some of this time travel stuff. It goes to the biblical perspective of asking the question, how much of this, how solid is our understanding of what God has done and what we are. It does question and break up our belief system to a certain degree as to what allowances God has made and what holes is there allowances of things that he's allowed us to manipulate and alter things. It makes you wonder.
Well, and I've heard the argument, Greg, that somebody will say, well, God wouldn't allow this and God would allow that. I'm thinking, well, how do you know? Did he tell you what he would allow? I mean, there's a million things that are happening on the planet, and most of them are not described in any recorded source. So somebody really, what it really comes down to is someone thinks their belief system has dictated who their God is and what he will and will not do. And so they have an argument with somebody else who doesn't have that belief system. And he said, well, God wouldn't let that happen. He wouldn't let this be changed or not. Well, how do you know that? So they're just really still making excuses for their own belief system.
A strong way of measuring that, like you say, is going back to the Bible when it talked about God was standing before Moses, and Moses came off the mountain. He broke the tablets once, went back and got another set, and at one point God had stood there. And we have our strong understanding of Almighty God that talks about these. We're talking about, like, I call them churchy Christians, and some of them are flea market Christians. They kind of just flip and flop, and they believe whatever they want.
I call them bean supper Christians.
That's good.
Got a lot of gas. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, they have this idea that God does not change. He does not alter his way of doing things. If that was a stolid, actual, complete, irrefutable condition, God would have stood before Moses and said, we're going to wipe them all out. and we're going to start over with you. And Moses wouldn't have anything to say about it. But yet Moses stood in Almighty God's face and said, you will remember your covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And it says specifically in there, God repented. So
wow.
God is flexible. He is changeable. He alters his way of doing things according to some. And I could tell another show that's very good, biblical stuff, that I could tell you about what I feel about these things too. Show number 17, which comes to that number, that's pretty interesting too.
Okay, what about 17 and 7?
There's a curious thing in this quantum shift that I've found, and there's a thing that's called the least random number, and they've done this little report that was in there. I picked it up and I put it in the report, where they asked the people a question, and it's an actual case study that was done a number of times, MIT study that was done this, and the report talks about a smaller professor sitting there talking to students about all these things and asking questions. And they thought they were just kidding with him. He said, go and ask people pick a number between 1 and 20, and predominantly from previous MIT stuff and this newer thing that was done recently, last 10 years, the students would ask the question, ask these people what the number is. What number would you pick from 1 to 20? People come in the door, one after the other, the running tally, the number 17 came up more recently and more often, and was established in this report as being the least random number. The significant thing about the number 17 is that 17 represents preservation and protection in a time of tribulation and judgment. And wonder why people have been seeing so much. The TV series, again, back either Killjoys, I think it was, Dark Matter, other shows, the number 17 comes up more often than any other number in usage in the patterns of the shows. And Red 17 was one of the ones in Dark Matter, or was it Killjoys? It's just too spooky. It's just too spooky, that number 17. And yet we are living in the number 2017. Is this the year that we're going to see some sort of liberty, some sort of freedom from Evil Bastards Incorporated ahead of the worst stuff that comes later still? That's a very prominent number, and I've had some serious feelings about it. And there's probably a lot of other people out there. I've seen like 1111 combinations of numbers like that, but 17 seems to be one that's really significant, and it's hitting the whole of the population because we're desperate. We're seeing that time and frame in the future where there will be some sort of centuries of revenge where we come against all this Evil Bastard Incorporated stuff, and we try to change the world. And there's some otherworldly stuff that's coming too that I can't wait to do another show on. Some of this stuff.
Hey, let me break format here. Is somebody there in the room with you?
Frances.
She's what?
Her name's Frances. She's one of my helpers and editors that was helping me work on this quantum shift.
Oh, okay, excellent. Can I have one word with her?
Okay. Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah. Want to say something, Frances? Here you go.
I'm here.
Hey, Frances, Daniel out from the Edge Television Broadcast.
Yeah, I'm the super wonderful secretary, super dishwasher, everything.
Whoa!
Helper.
Wow, man, what a title! So, do you believe that the Mandela Effect is real?
There have been changes, yes, and my age is old enough to remember Howdy Doody, so that'll give you a time frame. And there's things that I remember that have not stayed the same.
So you remember when dirt was created?
Pardon?
No, that's just off the cuff there. No, really. So what are you saying? Have you seen some changes?
Yes, I have. And
the night before Christmas.
The night before Christmas is one that I found.
Okay.
The night before Christmas, and all through the house, blah blah blah. Not even a mouse.
All right.
Ma in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled down for a long winter's nap, but
Right.
that particular sentence has changed.
Can you tell me what it is? Because I thought you just said it verbatim. I know that.
What did it get changed to, huh?
Our brains. We
had just settled our brains for a long winter's nap. And it was
no.
Brains.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, right.
It's
so your
horrible.
head's exploding now, right?
You got to be kidding me.
I found that one, 6 months ago or something.
It makes no poetic sense whatsoever when you look at the word and look at the etymology of the word brains back in the 1800s.
They didn't
The
have
word
brains
wasn't
back
used.
then, man.
It took like 30 years before that guy, after the guy was dead, had done the poem in the 1820s, that the word was actually used as a medical term. So the question comes up is, where did he come up with our brains? You know, mama, instead of ma in her kerchief and I in my cap, had just settled our brains to a long winter's nap. You know, where the hell did this come from? You know, where it couldn't even be a time travel thing. There's something else that really makes that Mandela effect even more significantly strange.
Okay, let me close out with Francis. Francis, you still there?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so what do you think all this means? And I'll get to Greg's opinion here in just a minute.
Oh, it's hard to say. It means we're in that time which is unlike any other. You know, you've read the Revelation. There's some verses in there that a time that will never be ever again like this. And how can you explain quantum physics in a Bible that's hundreds of years old? You can't. They use metaphor. So that's the best metaphor they could come up with. It a time unlike any other time.
Wow. Okay. Well,
and there's more to come. There's more to come too. So everybody needs to be really strong in their faith.
What do you mean?
Confidence in God. You have to be confident in God that He's going to be your protector, but you got to be doing what He wants you to do, not your own silly idea.
Francis, Francine, what is more to come?
There's going to be more strange changes. And a lot of people, they're already having nervous breakdowns. You can look at Drudge every day and see the craziness. Yeah. And the ones that are solid, they're going to have to be super solid. You know, no wavering. Like, you pray to God for protection and demand, you know, that He help you, and He will. But you have to be no wavering, no wishy-washy kind of stuff going on there. Well, and it'll separate people from the strong ones from the weak.
Well, doesn't the idea of the Mandela effect, that some claim that is wishy-washy on people's in their life psyche, that hey, if you believe in things are changing, there's something wrong with you. So is that just reverse psychology being used on people? Yeah,
they're trying to make people think, oh, you didn't. It's that gaslight thing. Oh, honey, don't you remember that you were supposed to do blah blah, and oh, you did that, you know, don't you remember, dear? And it makes the person less confident. But that's what I mean to say. You have to talk to Dad, you know, if you're not sure, and have a personal conversation. Don't get somebody else's opinion about it.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for talking with me the second there. Back to you, Greg. You wanted to talk about CERN toward the end. We are getting toward the end. And then, well, we're not going to just shut off at 10. Yes. Our time. I want you to say what you wanted to tell the folks out there.
How much time we got?
We got enough for you to finish whatever you need. So if I need to go over, I'll go over. I don't care.
Overtime? All right. This is the thing I would do if I was have the opportunity to talk in church and tell people what's going on. This thing I saw, and this goes into another show we'll do. I'd love to do this. Talk about this. The CERN thing. One of the things, if people are familiar with the baptism of the Holy Ghost, this understanding of this anointing of God upon us to lay hands on the sick and they shall recover. The people believe in that strength, works of faith with power. Do a eSword search, Bible Hub search for those words. Work of faith with power. That's a singular thing that you need to understand. That you need to have this, you know, above all that you can ask or think from God, so that you can do the things that Jesus said. That's, you know, greater things than these can you do, and will you do. This thing that they're looking for from CERN, and it'll go into this other show, and just make a note of this for the show as a topic subject, that they're looking to find a way to duplicate this ether for themselves. They're trying to find out. If you look and do history, there's one particular book that's quite significant. It's called Handbook of Denominations. And you get the older copies of this, and it covers all these major denominations and the breakup of all of them. The majority of them have started with fire revivals of the Holy Ghost, of outbreaks, of people getting healed, hands being laid upon, and you know, blind be able to see, cripples walk. This whole idea that there's something about the fact that people that have this anointing on them, they're not bothered by poltergeist. They're not bothered by evil spirits and demons and stuff. And so people that have this protection, if these evil bastards incorporated at the top can use CERN to find out what this God particle is, find out how to manipulate ether and some sort of energetic energy to protect themselves from he that is coming again during this great day of the Lord. That's what they're really after. It's not the time machine. It's not doing all this stuff. It's not. There's other ways to make portals. People are experiencing ghosts and poltergeist on a mass scale. The thing with the black-eyed children, all these other things that are happening, larger in numbers, more UFOs. It's like Eli Marzulli's saying, this stuff is burgeoning and it's not going away. And it's not just UFO stuff; it's all the other worldly stuff with it. Mm-hmm. It's on the increase. There was an article that came out just not long ago that's talking about more people are going to exorcists instead of going to doctors now because they're getting a spiritual sense there's something else deeper involved in all our difficulties in our everyday lives that are getting worse. And this thing about this Holy Ghost, this anointing, this grace and power, this dunamis of God, these people in the communities of the Masons and the Illuminati, they know what this is, and they've tried to destroy it from all the major denominations, and they've tried to cut it down and prevent it from being an outbreak because it does protect. If you go watch this one video that came out of the BBC, there's a YouTube version of it. It's called Nightmares. It does specifically talk about sleep paralysis. It reveals some of the things of the origins of movies like Freddy Krueger and some of these things that people have encountered in their experience of life that has been terrifying and life-altering and life-destroying. There's one lady of the entire video portion. There's one portion of that where this woman talks about that she used the name of Jesus to stop this stuff from happening and preventing it. It's crazy that now that they're saying, as much as people are talking about abductions, that most like 20% of the population, probably greater number, sleep paralysis, they're saying same 20% of the population has experienced this. They've gone as far as experiencing something called exploding brain syndrome, that they hear this shotgun blast inside their head. People, the Mandela Effect people, some of them have encountered like major. Look these things up. Do a whole show on portions. We'll cover it in depth. Anything you ask me about, I'll show you all the research I have on it. But this God particle thing is one of the most significant things in the history of this time that they really want. Lucifer fell and lost that anointing that was upon him. He can find a way to take this anointing and put it back on their individuals. It does make me suspicious that the Antichrist that's coming, if he's an otherworldly dude, it expresses in the Bible that he's a man, not necessarily mad, he's a look more stout than his fellows. That's the singular word used for this. Whatever this entity is, whatever this otherworldly, I do believe he's probably going to be a hybrid of some sort, because the Bible speaks of him as being a man, the son of perdition, as that he's in such a state that he can't be redeemed. He can't ask for forgiveness and get forgiveness. There's something about him that separates him from the rest of man. And there's a good, powerful thing I can talk on the show about that, about why I do believe that the false prophet and the Antichrist are one and the same dude. And I can cover that in a more stronger basis. But the CERN is looking after this particle. They want to find this God particle, and they have discovered the Coleson. So it's disturbed what they want to do with this ether and what they can do with it and how they're going to use it to make their own God man on the earth and actually be able to mimic those things that the Bible does say that they will, make false miracles and lay hands on the sick. Cover. It's going to fool many. It's part of the great deception that is the greater deception I see is coming. Go ahead, Art. Again.
Well, is there going to be equal and opposite or greater response from, say, the good spiritual people that are alive?
I do say so. There's been people, and I don't subscribe to that pre-trib rapture idea. There's a lot of flaws and failures in that, because it doesn't speak of some sort of major revival after a great removal of God's people. God's people are going to be here just like they were in the days of the past and all the tribulation stuff. And if people did a word study on that word tribulation, I would dare to find any attribute of that word tribulation that could be attributed to God himself. All these things, I can do a word study, that'd be like 18 or 19 episodes we would do by then. And it'd be quite significant, the things that people could learn and understand it. I do believe with this 17 being a time of freedom, of liberty, that from all this Evil Bastards Incorporated, we do have this promise of two wings of an eagle that's been separated from the Old Testament, of safety, some lands of safety. There's been many that have talked about this area of the Southwest as being one of those two wings of the eagle because of this Los Lunas Decalogue that has the Ten Commandments in Hebrew written on a stone in Paleo Hebrew. It is a very significant thing that more than 300 years ago, that the Navajo Indian people were given all the way of weaving. That there's no culture anywhere else on the face of the earth. When the Sanhedrin of Israel came back into effect, that they needed to have a way to remember how to do exactly how they were to weave their garments, to be certified on their level of God's approval, to be able to build the temple, operate in the temple. There was no other culture on the face of the earth that was given that knowledge to be able to weave things according to, and the Hebrew people came through here and left their mark on a rock in southern New Mexico, and middle of New Mexico, called Los Lunas. And you can find that the Navajo Indians, they were the ones they came to find that knowledge and produce it again, bring this up to the Sanhedrin and stuff. So we are in tremendous biblical times. They do have the red heifer. They have the ashes of the red heifer. They have the way of building the temple again, down to the last stone, every implement. There's some good people could go back and do research, and they can, run it the ground any way they want. But Ron Wyatt did find the Ark of the Covenant. The Israel people have been using Discordia to try to hide that, the rest of the world's knowledge base. But in the next few years, that's going to come out too. We're going to see that point when the Antichrist is standing in that temple and see him take his own blood and sprinkle it on the Ark of the Covenant. And that day will begin this greatest thing of this great tribulation of 3.5 years. That's my significant thing about what I saw in that. But he's going to have that anointing upon him to terrify the world with that. The same way God preserves us and makes it safe for us in our life, without that Holy Ghost baptism, without that belief of having it and receiving it, the world's going to be in trouble. There's all those people, ghost walkers.
Let me ask you something. You mentioned the number 17. So should we be looking to see if that number is appearing in our life in various forms?
I notice a lot all the time. It's like, you probably heard a lot of people talk about 11:11, that the clock, they've always looked at the clock and their pattern 333 or 444. It's good to see and notice that. Just kind of feel for it out and just notice how many times the number 17 comes up.
But if it does, would one say somebody or something is watching over me and that I may be protected for what's coming?
It's very likely that, because you have experienced the Mandela Effect. See, at this point in my time, and I even stated outright in the report, I really do have suspicion, and I have a certain measure of distrust for people that have not experienced that Mandela Effect, and it does make me question them more, because I've seen this thing, I've sensed this in the future, that there's going to be a purge in the earth, and it does talk about the population drop and how many people are going to be removed from the population. The real population numbers that I've been able to uncover, and the next show we do, I'll make note of that too, you can see this. Major economists has already pointed this out, that our population in America must be vastly reduced already, because they're bringing all these illegals in to keep up the economy and keep up the flow. Because why are all these businesses going under? And there's people still spending money like they always had. We've had crashes before. We've had downturns in America, but something else significant has taken place here. There's a particular major website that deals with the actual volume sales of gasoline per month. The highest point was way back somewhere about 84, 85. There was big numbers of it was always like 50 million gallons a day. The high point was around 2003, 2004, about June, during the Iraq war stuff. You'll see a number of 67 million gallons of fuel being sold and purchased that day. You go down further, closer to 2014, December, January, it dropped down to 17 million gallons per day. That's a vast 50 million gallon drop. How have people disappeared? Have there been a greater population reduction around the world already? This is just for the numbers for the United States. There are some undercover reports that I've seen, and the insurance people that want to come out and whistleblowing and point this out. there's indicators that I've already seen that the world population has already dropped to somewhere around 5 billion because of the number of cancers is on the increase to such a big degree. The population, the consumer base has dropped in America considerably, and we're going to see a downturn like we've never seen. And some of them call it the Greater Depression. Go ahead.
So what course of action do you recommend people take?
If that's another Discordian thing that was done with the Y2K to try to boost up the idea that was going to be a major overturn and collapse. And this cry-wolf situation has occurred numbers of times, and also that 2012, and not necessarily nothing happened. But a lot of the reports, the first preliminary stuff that was starting to show up was around 2012 and 2013 about this Mandela stuff. And the quantum shift was really showing out heavily then. And one of the things, like I said, that Paul LaViolette has mentioned that in the precursor, major ice age stuff has always been foreshadowed by a galactic superwave of this ether that hits the Earth. I wouldn't really worry about a possible ice age because who knows how many people are going to live to see it. But yes, it wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't be hurting to really bulk up on this information about what you can believe and trust God for. When you have many types of stories in the Bible that talk about multiplication of goods, not just what Jesus did. The famous lady portion of the Bible that was told by God to take the oil that she had, and that's all the money she had left, to go out in the neighborhood and get all the vessels you could get, and take that one jar of oil and fill up all these other vessels. And God multiplied what she had. There's going to be massive miracles of these things happen again. And it starts with something you already have. If you only have one can of beans left, God can take that one can of beans. I know of an incident when I was working in the prison system that was at the store that was making the rounds. A guy paid a visit to visitation. It was around Christmas. And he wasn't thinking of very many people being at visitation for the inmates, and didn't think there would be that many people there of takers. He brought in 1 6-pack of Pepsi. He had it in a paper bag. And he was asking if anybody would want one as a Christmas present. They would give, just that this one singular guy had a strong belief in Almighty God. He reached in that bag, Daniel, and he went through a line of about 30 people and handed out from that single 6-pack more than 30 cans of Pepsi. And when he left there, he looked in the bag, and that same 6-pack was still in it. These stories today still exist. Miracles still do occur, and people need to really work in their heart and set their heart on God and look to Him with provision in their mind of being preserved and protected by Almighty God for the things that are coming, because it's going to be bad, and we all need to really pray and believe like we've never believed.
Amazing. Well, I'll tell you what, we've got you down about 8. I think we got up to 18 more shows we got to do with you, Greg.
All right.
I think it's 18. And man, I'll tell you what, it's been awesome having you on the program tonight. If you got any final thing you'd like to say, it seemed like you did, but if you got something else to kind of wrap it up, you go right ahead.
I think that would pretty much be the cornerstone there. Just be prepared, believe God. There was even people that badmouth other preachers and stuff. You could learn something from them, from what they have learned themselves, even if they themselves aren't perfect. There's things they do and say that things that do work and matter. Okay. There's a particular set. There's take a 3x5 card and do this for yourself, and take these 3 things to heart. Be quick to forgive. Be quick to repent, and be quick to believe God. And start with those simple 3 things, and work your day out, and live with God and believe in your heart things that are going to happen. Don't strike your family. Protect your family. Be the provision and provider. If other people think you're completely crazy in your family, be the one guy that is the life preserver that these people need in the time of trouble that's coming. And even if they don't believe, because you believe, you may be the thing that saves their life.
All right. Well said, Greg Coleman. I appreciate you coming on the Edge Television broadcast. Can we have you on again sometime?
Yes, sir. I appreciate you very much. I do, Daniel. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, we're going to let you go, Greg. This program will begin to replay in its the whole thing will play in our main player there directly after, so you can watch it if you like to. And of course, we'll put it up on YouTube and various places as well. But we're going to have you back on the show, Greg. So I appreciate you coming on.
God bless you, man, and love you very much.
All right. Love you, brother. Bye.
Thank you. Adios.
All right, everybody, that was Greg Coleman. Wow, what an outstanding program there of technology and quantum shift and scalar waves and everything else was going on in this program. Loved it. So we'll have him back with another. It sounds like every topic we talked about has. It sounds like a 2-hour show. He's a really good, great guy. We appreciate him coming on the program. Next week, we're going to have with us Chris McCleary. He is the National Director of the National Dream Center. So if anybody's ever had a dream, hey, you want to talk about it, come back next week and let's hear your dream and see if we can get some kind of interpretation. Who knows? Maybe somebody in the live chat may have a dream that they had and somebody else in the live chat might interpret that dream. You never know. But we'll find out about dreams, and it's always something that fascinated me. Where they come from? Who's programming us? Who's putting those dreams in there? And I don't go with this. They just popping up on some brainiac synapse down somewhere flying around in there. I don't go with that. No. 2 weeks we'll have Laura Maxwell on the program. She went from New Age to supernatural. We'll find out what happened to her, and we'll hear her story. So a lot of great guests coming up on the edge. Well, that's going to be a wrap for this evening. Thank you, everyone, for your great questions. We're going to see you next week. Daniel Ott for the Edge. Bye-bye.